The 1980s gave us some truly legendary movies that were perfect for their time. But if you tried to present these same story ideas to Hollywood executives today, you'd probably face an awkward silence before security escorted you out. These 8 movies perfectly show why nostalgia sometimes needs a serious reality check.
Number 1. Mr. Mom turned the idea of a man doing housework into a 90-minute comedy hit. But Michael Keaton's character Jack Butler wasn't just changing diapers and vacuuming carpets. He was accidentally leading what would later be seen as one of the most outdated gender comedies of the Reagan era. The story follows Jack, a Detroit auto engineer who loses his job during the early 1980s recession and has to become a stay-at-home dad. Meanwhile, his wife Caroline, played by Terry Garr, goes back to work as an advertising executive, creating domestic chaos as Jack struggles with everything from laundry mishaps to dealing with playground politics among suburban moms. The entire comedy depends on the idea that men are naturally bad at taking care of children and doing housework, with every joke reinforcing the stereotype that fathers are basically big kids who can't figure out simple household chores. Behind the scenes, Keaton faced a tough challenge with studio executives who didn't believe he could carry a major film, especially since his improvisational comedy style clashed with Terry Garr's more traditional acting approach. This created constant tension that director Stan Dragotti had to manage throughout the film's modest $5 million production. Working with child actors caused repeated delays as Keaton tried to improvise around unpredictable kids, while technical scenes with broken appliances needed exact timing that often failed during filming. What makes this movie such a clear product of its time is how it treats Jack's domestic challenges as automatically funny, instead of showing them as part of a normal learning process. Meanwhile, Caroline faces sexual harassment at work that's played off as a joke, rather than being seen as a serious problem. Conservative audiences were even upset that the film showed a woman being successful in her career while her husband stayed home, viewing it as an attack on traditional family values.
Number 2. Big shows that the 1980s had a very different idea about what romantic relationships were okay. Somehow, a movie about a boy having romance with a woman became a popular family movie that got Tom Hanks nominated for an Oscar. Josh Baskin is an unhappy kid from New Jersey who makes a wish at a carnival fortune-telling machine to be big and wakes up the next morning in a grown man's body. He runs away to New York City, where he gets a job at a toy company and quickly moves up in the company thanks to his kid-like view of what kids actually want, all while starting a romantic relationship with his coworker Susan, who doesn't know she's sleeping with someone who was playing with action figures just weeks before. What makes this movie interesting is that Tom Hanks first thought the movie would only be sold on video and was worried about his career, while the famous piano scene needed a huge 16-foot keyboard that Hanks and Robert Loggia spent weeks learning to play with their feet, refusing stunt doubles because they wanted it to look real, which somehow didn't apply to questioning whether the main story was right or wrong. Behind the scenes, choosing actors was total chaos, with Steven Spielberg first wanting Harrison Ford, then going through Dennis Quaid, John Travolta, and Robert De Niro, who was actually chosen before quitting and almost stopping production completely. The film's romantic story would be immediately seen by today's audiences as seriously wrong, because no matter how Josh's body changed, he's still mentally a child having romantic activity with an adult, creating permission problems that would cause anger from child protection groups and probably result in the script never getting approved by movie executives today. Director Penny Marshall ignored the serious mental damage of a child suddenly dealing with relationships, treating the whole situation as fun and magical, rather than the identity problem and possible abuse situation it actually is, making this feel less like sweet 1980s charm.
Number 3. 16 Candles made John Hughes a teen movie legend, but watching it today reveals a film that treats racist stereotypes and sexual assault as jokes in what's supposed to be a sweet coming-of-age story. Molly Ringwald plays Sam Baker, a suburban Chicago sophomore whose family completely forgets her 16th birthday because they're too busy planning her sister's wedding. She's left to deal with teenage crushes, social awkwardness, and the constant attention of freshman Ted the Geek, all while secretly falling for the popular senior Jake Ryan. The real issue starts with Long Dunk Dong, the Chinese exchange student played by Getty Watanabe, whose every scene relies on exaggerated accents and fortune cookie-style sayings, something that would instantly get a writer fired today for being racist and insensitive. Behind the scenes, Hughes was managing a cast of real teenagers, including 16-year-old Ringwald, who was quickly becoming his main muse, while Michael Schaufling, who played Jake Ryan, got the part after showing up to his audition on a motorcycle. No one realized at the time that they were creating one of the most controversial foreign exchange student characters in movie history. What makes this film such a clear product of its time is how casually it treats what we now recognize as serious problems. For example, Jake basically gives his unconscious, drunk girlfriend to Ted, implying he can do whatever he wants with her, a situation that's treated as a funny subplot instead of assault. The script presents this as a quirky romantic solution instead of something deeply wrong. Hughes even had to cut several scenes to earn a PG-13 rating, including extra moments with Long Dunk Dong that reportedly made the character even more offensive, plus some sexual jokes that were toned down so the movie could still appeal to teenagers. Even in the 1980s, the film sparked backlash from parents and feminist critics who noticed that beneath its sweet suburban charm was a story that normalized male entitlement and made fun of female vulnerability. Conservative viewers were uneasy about its open talk of teen sexuality, while progressive audiences were angered by its racist caricatures and casual sexism disguised as high school humor.
Number 4. Overboard sounds like the setup for a psychological thriller, but somehow Hollywood turned it into a romantic comedy about a carpenter who kidnaps a woman with amnesia and tricks her into believing she's his wife. Goldie Hawn plays Joanna Staten, a spoiled rich woman who lives on a yacht and refuses to pay Kurt Russell's carpenter after he builds her a custom closet. In anger, she pushes him and his tools overboard. But karma hits back when she falls off her own boat that same night and wakes up with complete memory loss. Dean, the carpenter, sees her story on the local news and decides to get revenge by convincing this confused woman that she's actually his wife, Annie. He takes her home, making her take care of his 4 wild kids and do all the housework while he goes off to work. What's truly shocking is that director Gary Marshall and the entire crew somehow believed this idea was sweet instead of disturbing. Hawn had to perform dangerous water stunts in freezing Oregon waters, while the story asked audiences to cheer for a man who was literally keeping a woman with brain damage captive. Behind the scenes, Hawn and Russell disagreed about their acting styles. Hawn wanted to do multiple takes to perfect the comedy timing, while Russell preferred a more direct approach, forcing Marshall to constantly manage their tension on set. Even in the 1980s, the movie drew criticism from feminist reviewers, who pointed out that the plot romanticized manipulation and abuse, while teaching Joanna that her worth came from being a good homemaker instead of having control over her own life. If someone tried to pitch this story today, studio executives would probably call security. After all, it's basically about a man who finds a woman with memory loss and lies to her so he can make her his unpaid housekeeper.
Number 5. Bachelor Party made Tom Hanks America's sweetheart, even though the movie is basically a full-length ad for why women should never trust their fiancés around strippers and cocaine. The story follows Rick Gasco, a Catholic school bus driver who's about to marry his much more sophisticated fiancée, Debbie Thompson. But his wild friends decide to throw him the ultimate bachelor party, complete with sex workers, drugs, and enough chaos to make Hugh Hefner embarrassed. Meanwhile, Debbie's rich parents plot to ruin the wedding by getting her sleazy ex-boyfriend, Cole, to tempt Rick into cheating. What makes this movie such a clear example of 1980s excess is that the entire comedy is built on the idea that before getting married, a man deserves one last night of wild, consequence-free sexual fun. The story treats cheating as a natural part of growing up instead of a serious betrayal. Every woman who isn't the pure, innocent bride is shown as either a nagging buzzkill or a disposable sex object. Behind the scenes, the production team was dealing with Tom Hanks's rapidly growing fame, and the studio was worried about whether audiences would accept him in such a raunchy role. Many of his scenes involved prostitutes and situations filmed at actual brothel locations with real sex workers as extras, which caused legal problems and safety concerns. Director Neil Israel had to carefully manage the chaotic party sequences, which involved complicated choreography, especially in the big finale, where Rick fights Cole inside a 36-screen movie theater while 3D movies play all around them. The film immediately drew criticism from conservative groups who condemned its open sexual content and drug use, while feminist critics pointed out that every woman in the movie existed only to either please or block men's sexual desires.
Number 6. Mannequin turned the idea of the perfect woman into an actual object. And somehow, Andrew McCarthy falling in love with a department store dummy became one of the strangest romantic comedies of the Reagan era. The story follows Jonathan Switcher, a struggling artist in Philadelphia who discovers that one of his mannequin creations is possessed by the spirit of an ancient Egyptian princess named Emmy, played by Kim Cattrall. She magically comes to life only when no one else is around and helps Jonathan create stunning window displays that save the failing Prince & Company department store from going bankrupt. What makes this movie such a fascinating example of 1980s excess is that its entire romantic idea is based on a woman who literally exists as a decorative object until a man's love gives her life and purpose, which is basically every feminist critic's nightmare, wrapped in shoulder pads and synthesizer music. Behind the scenes, Andrew McCarthy felt uncomfortable with the film's over-the-top tone since he had mostly worked on serious indie dramas. His creative disagreements with director Michael Gottlieb caused tension during filming as they tried to find a balance between emotional sincerity and complete fantasy absurdity. The technical side of the movie was also extremely challenging. McCarthy had to act in most scenes opposite an actual mannequin or off-camera stand-ins, requiring careful timing and many retakes to make it seem like he was having real romantic conversations with a piece of fiberglass. The production also relied on clever lighting and camera tricks to show Emmy's magical transformations, all done on a small budget during freezing Philadelphia winter nights, which made the complex dance and movement scenes even harder to film. The movie quickly drew criticism from feminist writers who pointed out that turning the female lead into a literal object whose only purpose is to inspire a man's creativity is basically the pure definition of objectification, disguised as a lighthearted love story.
Number 7. The Wizard turned Nintendo's marketing team into Hollywood producers, creating what's basically a 90-minute commercial for Super Mario Bros. 3 disguised as a touching family road trip movie. The story follows troubled teenager Jimmy Woods, who escapes from a group home with his brother Corey and their friend Haley to compete in a video game championship in California. Jimmy's incredible Nintendo gaming skills become their ticket to fame and fortune as they try to avoid social services and explore the growing video game culture of late 1980s America. What makes this movie such a perfect example of corporate synergy gone wild is that nearly every moment of the story exists just to show off Nintendo products. Jimmy's emotional journey takes a backseat to long gameplay scenes that act like flashy commercials for upcoming Nintendo releases. Behind the scenes, the production struggled with extremely tight deadlines to stay aligned with Nintendo's marketing plan for Super Mario Bros. 3. This meant constant licensing negotiations and strict promotional timing that often disrupted filming and caused major scheduling problems. Director Todd Holland had a tough job trying to balance real storytelling with the constant pressure for product placement. Fred Savage, fresh off the Wonder Years, carried most of the emotional weight of the movie, while Christian Slater pushed for more depth in his character, even though the film was basically a feature-length infomercial. This created tension between the cast's hopes for a meaningful drama and the studio's commercial goals. The film quickly faced backlash from critics and parents who saw it as obvious advertising aimed at kids, raising alarms about how entertainment and marketing were starting to blur together, a concern that would only grow with time.
Number 8. Red Dawn turned teenage America's Cold War fears into the ultimate high school action fantasy, where Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen get to live out every suburban kid's dream of fighting Soviet invaders with hunting rifles and pure American courage. The story follows a group of Colorado high school students who watch their small town get invaded by Soviet, Cuban, and Nicaraguan forces during a fictional World War III. Brothers Jed and Matt Eckert, along with their classmates, escape into the mountains and form a guerrilla resistance group called the Wolverines, using their knowledge of the area to fight back against the enemy occupation. What makes this movie such a striking time capsule of Reagan-era militarism is how director John Milius essentially created a recruitment film disguised as a teen adventure story. Every scene is designed to make viewers believe a communist invasion was not only possible, but likely, suggesting that American teenagers should always be ready to pick up guns and defend their country. Behind the scenes, the production was a complete logistical nightmare.
The crew battled unpredictable Colorado mountain weather while managing dangerous practical effects and real explosions that nearly caused multiple fatalities, including a helicopter stunt that went terribly wrong and injured several people, forcing major script rewrites. Patrick Swayze often clashed with Milius over his character, wanting more emotional depth rather than just playing a one-note patriotic hero. Meanwhile, Charlie Sheen faced criticism for his lack of experience, creating tension among the young cast as they tried to meet the director's tough, military-style expectations. What's especially wild about this production is that Milius insisted the actors undergo real weapons training and learn actual combat tactics, basically turning them into guerrilla fighters for the movie. The film quickly sparked controversy for its over-the-top patriotism and its xenophobic portrayal of foreign enemies, with critics accusing it of promoting fear and warlike nationalism during an already tense time in U.S.-Soviet relations.